So glad that you are with us today. There are lots of other places that you could have been, but you've chosen to be with us, and for that, we're thankful. It's the beginning of the Christmas season. Can you believe it? In the midst of what has been a very strange year, the culture is about to shift around us and is going to be packed out with reminders of Jesus everywhere. So today, Shane is going to start a brand new teaching that he has simply called Ordinary Joe. Ordinary Dad, Extraordinary Baby. So we're going to take the next 4 Sundays as we move towards Christmas to see how God used an ordinary guy to push through some very interesting challenges in order to raise a baby that God would use to save the world. You won't want to miss this. It's going to challenge you and maybe even surprise you. So, Shane is ready for this, and I hope you are too. Let's go there.
Christmas for me normally brings up thoughts of my dad. My dad was a big, tough guy, a manly kind of man. And he had those big, rough, calloused hands. He was a hard worker. I got my big hands from him, but I got my soft hands from working on a computer keyboard pretty much every day. Him and I have certainly lived different kinds of lives. My dad raised me around dump trucks and excavators and backhoes and tractors and all that manly kind of stuff. And I don't know if he would have, or if he was hoping that I would inherit his love for all this kind of stuff, but I didn't. Those traits and that love got passed on to my older brothers, and I got, let's just say I got other skills. But my dad, he impacted me deep, real deep. Never got his love for tractors and all that kind of stuff, but I got his love for Jesus, which kind of makes me who I am today. One thing we all have in common is that we all have a dad. Living or not, biological or not, maybe an adoptive dad or a stepdad or anything else, we all had one or have one. Some of us, even more than one. Think about that for a second. Some of us think about our dads and we are very emotional because of the positive impact they've had on us. Others of us think about our dad and the emotion may not be positive. Your dad maybe abandoned you or hurt you or simply ignored you. But whatever the case, there's power and great responsibility in being a dad. And when we think about the Christmas story, when we think about that story, there's no dad on earth that had the responsibility of the dad in this Christmas story, and sometimes we overlook him this time of year. This time of year, the baby Jesus gets lots of attention, and rightfully so. Mary, she gets lots of attention too. But the dad of this baby, we simply know him as Joseph, he doesn't get the spotlight a whole lot. Actually, he hardly gets much of a mention if you think about it. There's only 16 verses, 16, in the entire Bible that even mention this dude's name. But yet, no man on earth played a more important role in the life of the baby Jesus than this guy. But we do know where this ordinary Joe worked. He was a carpenter. Later in the life of Jesus, when Jesus is teaching people all this amazing stuff that he knew about God, the people that were listening to him said, "Where does this dude get all these smarts? Isn't he just the carpenter's son?" And so yeah, Jesus was raised up in the carpenter's shop. You see, there were 2 kinds of builders. There was a tekton. A tekton was a basic builder who built furniture and chairs and yoke for oxen and stuff like that. So there was a tekton. And then there was an architecton, a master builder who would have many people working for him. It's where we get the word architect from. Guess who Joseph was? If you guessed tekton, you guessed right. He was the normal daily grind kind of carpenter. He was the ordinary Joe. And Jesus, after the baby stage, he would have been a protege, learning his dad's trade in the carpenter shop. That's just the way that it worked. My dad was also, to use the same language, a tekton. He could build stuff. And I hung around in the builder's shop, so to speak, for much of my young life. But it just didn't take. I've got memories of Dad sending me to the hardware store just down the street from us, and he'd say, come back with a 5-pound bag of nails. And I'd come back with a 10-pound bag of screws. Or he'd say, go down to the hardware store and get me some deck screws. And I'd come back with a great big bag of shingle nails. It just didn't take. I was never a good protege. But Jesus was. And we know that Jesus was one because he also grew to be a carpenter, a tekton, just like his dad. But learning the trade is often secondary because the trade doesn't always take as much as the dad, or as much as even my dad, or as much as Jesus' dad probably hoped that it would. But the lessons, the impacts, the influence, this is kind of where it happens. And I'm sure that this is a place where God used the ordinary Joe, Joseph, to shape the extraordinary Jesus in a way that really only an ordinary Joe could do. If you look at some of the teachings of Jesus, Jesus eventually taught things like, he taught about a son who left home, who blew everything his dad had worked for, and his father forgave him. Could Jesus have seen that kind of forgiveness in his dad? Probably. Jesus taught that greatness is found in being humble, and being powerful means doing the menial tasks and serving others. Could Jesus have seen that and learned it from his dad, the tekton? Likely. Jesus taught that a man should never look at a woman with lust in his heart. Does that sound like something a dad would say to his teenage boy as they're working together in the carpentry shop one afternoon? Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? In this Christmas season, just think about it. Just think about how this extraordinary Joe was used by God to shape the values of this extraordinary Jesus. I never became a heavy equipment mechanic or an operator or even a general jack of all trades, but I was influenced by my dad to always try and be the hardest worker in the room. I never got the hard skills, but I was influenced by my dad to be sure that I love my wife, I love my family, I love Jesus, and I love the church. Influence is a powerful thing. And if any ordinary Joe could influence an extraordinary Jesus, who could God use you to influence? As we think this Christmas about how God used an ordinary Joe, a tekton, to shape the values of the one that God would later use to change the entire way people relate to God, what could God do through ordinary you? As much as we all have responsibility, God hasn't laid it on any of us to raise and influence the Savior of the world. But who is it in your world that God can use you to impact that person's life in a positive way forever? Every mom, dad, step-parent, adopted parent, aunt, uncle have a power and a responsibility to influence someone, to put the values of Jesus in someone, to live the values of Jesus for someone. And you might say, well, who am I? What can I do? I'm just an ordinary Joe. Well, welcome to the club, because I'm one too. And Joseph was one way before me. It's a long line. And it's that lineup. It's in that lineup that God is constantly scanning. It's that lineup that he picks from. It's the lineup of the ordinary Joes that have the potential to change the world when God steps into the story. You'll never be Mary, and you'll never be Joseph. But history has been shaped by an ordinary Joe who stepped up and stepped in to be the person that God could use to shape someone else who would eventually do great things for God. So don't look over your shoulder looking for someone else for God to use. He's looking right at you. You're the one who he wants. Christmas proves it. He's always looking for the ordinary Joe.
Wow. Ordinary Joe. Shane was right. So many times we think we need to be perfect to inspire and pour into someone else. But God is looking for the ordinary amongst us, through which He can do extraordinary things. As you consider the profound role this ordinary dad, this ordinary Joe, had in the life of this baby that we think about every Christmas, don't lose sight of what God can do through you and me. So I hope this has been an encouragement for your life. We'd love to see you back here again next Sunday. Please take a minute today. Do it right now. Come on, you can do it. Press the share button. Share this with someone you know. We're sure there's an ordinary Joe out there who needs it.